job. It highlights the unwillingness of police and those who direct them to apply the law equitably and independently. When he broke through police lines last March, Splitting the Sky built on the message of Muqtada al-Zaidi, the Baghdad journalist who fired his shoes at the departing US president. Al-Zaidi's symbolic shot was seen and applauded around the world. By dramatizing the role of so-called law enforcers as protectors of international crime, Splitting the Sky highlighted that many millions of global citizens have seen more than enough evidence to understand that George W. Bush and his war cabinet are credibly accused war criminals. If we lived in a world where the integrity of law prevailed over the power of money, political corruption, and military might, the Cheney-Rumsfeld-Bush syndicate of war profiteers would have been apprehended long ago to face charges in a properly constituted court of international law. When Splitting the Sky presents himself this coming March to a provincial court in Calgary, Alberta, to face a criminal charge for obstruction of justice, who and what is really on trial? Whose sense of justice was really obstructed? I predict that in the light of future history, will cast the trial of Splitting the Sky as an important point of departure for a people's process, for a process of people's jurisprudence directed at bringing to justice those responsible for the highest order of international crime. The trial of Splitting the Sky calls attention to the partnership linking Barack Obama's presidency to the Cheney-Bush-Rumsfeld brand of organized crime headquarters in the military superpowers apparatus of so-called national security. It highlights the current US president's expansion of his predecessor's policy of aggressive warfare aimed at appropriating natural resources from indigenous peoples around the world. Conducted in the name of an implausible interpretation of what transpired on September 11, 2001, the ongoing 9/11 wars widen and accelerate the imperial onslaught that has gathered force ever since Christopher Columbus initiated a new world order in 1492. The trial of Splitting the Sky places a spotlight on the ruthlessness of state terror as manifest in torture, genocide, and aggressive warfare. More than 6 decades ago, the judges sentencing the convicted Nazi war criminals at Nuremberg deemed that aggressive warfare constitutes the supreme crime against the entire human family because it encompasses such a broad array of tributary international crimes. The police lines that Splitting the Sky briefly breached in Calgary, Alberta, were set up to protect the person whose blood-soaked hands signed the executive orders for an orgy of state-sponsored criminality. Thus, the Calgary Police Force, the RCMP, and those that direct them chose to make themselves, as well as their agencies, accomplices in horrific crimes. Crimes that have transformed words like Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay, Bugrong, dark sites, black sites, ghost prisoners, and extraordinary rendition into household names. As the Nuremberg principles make clear, the implicated law enforcement officers cannot claim in their defense that they were merely following orders in deciding to arrest Splitting the Sky rather than George W. Bush. And there's a lot of jurisprudence and discussion over the years about following orders does not give you a license to violate law, especially international law. Who gave the police their orders? What was the chain of command? What was the content of the directives given the police? The Crown prosecutors have a responsibility to make public this critical information in presenting a case against Splitting the Sky. Why? did George W. Bush and his handlers choose Calgary, Alberta as the site of the former Commander-in-Chief's first major speaking engagement after leaving the US presidency? Well, I got a few ideas. Calgary is a key colonial capital of the Texas-based oil and gas empire that resides at the very core of the world's most powerful military-industrial complex. Calgary is the political heartland of the minority government of Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Harper's ascent to power was as the Canadian franchise holder of the Bush brand of neocon governance, whose machinations regularly subordinate the rule of law to jack-booted displays of law and order. The neocon approach has seen officers of the Canadian government hand over civilians convicted of nothing to the Afghani puppet regime for certain torture. As illustrated by the treatment of Omar Khadr, the lawlessness of the current Canadian government makes Harper and Bush partners in victimizing child soldiers, contrary to many international treaties. A sponsor of Bush's talk in Calgary was the Bennett Jones law firm, one of the key agencies engaged in the fire sale of Western Canada's natural resources. Josh Blakeney got 56, Josh Blakeney, the media coordinator of globalization studies, got 56 signatures at my university, the University of Lethbridge, which has as its chief legal advisors Bennett Jones. So students at the University of Lethbridge were paying tuition, which was being channeled to be part of the funds which brought in George Bush. And that's a pretty political use of students' tuition funds, I would say. And he didn't get a decent and respectful answer from the president of the university, Bill Cade, who is a Texan. The colonization of Alberta's resources often takes place in complete defiance of Canada's constitutional affirmation of Aboriginal and treaty rights. And this is kind of the field that brought Splitting the Sky and I together. I could go on and on about this, but I'll press ahead. Will the Alberta judiciary's handling of Splitting the Sky's trial continue the slide of my home province, and I am an Albertan, and I have been since 1990, away from the sovereignty of Canada? Will the court extend Splitting the Sky a fair trial, or will the judge railroad the accused at the behest of political masters in Washington, Dallas, Houston, Ottawa, and Calgary? Will Splitting the Sky's right to present a full defense be respected, or will the judge demean his or her court to decide, say, that George Bush's real or imagined misdeeds, and that word I use advisedly, have no place in the proceedings? Will the Provincial Court of Alberta rise to the responsibilities invested in this important instrument of Canadian sovereignty, or will the trial of Splitting the Sky take place in a kangaroo court, putting on full display Calgary's colonial function in the American empire? Will the court encourage, embrace, and even demand a full airing of the real legal issues inherent in the decisions made by Splitting the Sky and those of the police officers that arrested him? Will it illuminate or obfuscate the responsibility of citizens when we see agents of the law, unwilling to enforce statutes like Canada's Crimes Against Humanity and War Crimes Act, 2000, legislation passed in 2000.